G'day legends and welcome to the first ever Chin Music podcast. My name is Tom Gallop and I am joined by the esteemed New South Wales captain, New South Wales most capped first class player of all time, Moises Henriques. Hello Mo.
Hello Tom, what a kind introduction mate. That's the nicest thing you've ever said about me. How are you?
I'm pretty nervous, I'm not going to lie. Didn't expect to find myself in the hosting flowery seat of a very big podcast, growing podcast, but very excited nonetheless. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, mate, I was really relaxed until I ran into you, and your nerves are starting to rub off on me, mate. So if you could just calm down a little bit over there, that'd be great.
When we first spoke about doing this podcast, if you were a 7 out of 10 confident that it'd work well with me as the co-host, where do you sit now about a week later?
Oh. How about we crack open a beer and I'll answer that question in about 20 minutes. What do you reckon?
Please. Mo's just going to the Gesky. Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Cheers. All the best, mate.
It's very hard to juggle all these things. Producer Hugo keeps telling me ball to chin, but I don't know whether to do ball to chin for the little quips or just the official stuff. Anyway, welcome to Chin Music, part of the Fanatics Clubhouse, providing a fan's eye view of the summer of cricket. Before we go too far, who are the Fanatics? Everyone knows the Fanatics. The Fanatics are Australian sporting fans and international party people who organise events and merchandise for passionate Australian fans. For more info, you can head to thefanatics.com. Obviously, Instagram, Facebook, @thefanatics. On YouTube, it's Fanatics TV. And the Fanatics website, thefanatics.com. Go there for all your sporting needs. Mo, we're going to talk about cricket. There's a lot to talk about. Obviously, it's the first week of the Test summer. But first, a podcast with you. Everyone keeps saying to me, was it Spotify on the iPad?
Oh, mate. It actually was. It really was. And it's the one thing I think when I go out, especially if you're at a pub or something like that, and it doesn't matter even if there's family around or kids around, as soon as, you know, the punter gets a little bit of liquid courage into them, they always come up and ask you what was on your Spotify playlist, mate? Like what were you watching that day in India? But as you know, and I think the common people and the people using their common sense would know that I wouldn't exactly leave my hotel room wide open with a camera crew and Mitchell Stark right at the front door if I was going to be doing anything dodgy under the sheets in India. But yeah, I guess it looked that way, and that's great. And you know, there's been a lot of good humour that's come out of it, which is great for them. Not so much for me because I get pestered all the time about it.
Well, I insisted on bringing in my Shane Warne helmet, which is next to you, and you insisted on bringing in your 1980s photo of Elle Macpherson. So that's the only thing that's made me curious about asking that one. Cricket podcast. There's obviously a lot of good cricket podcasts out there. The Grade Cricketer, which obviously makes me very nervous as an ex-grade cricketer. Willow Talk doing really good things, but I think we're onto something pretty cool here. What actually makes us different?
I think that we're both just starting as well. This is our first time hosting a podcast. I guess for me, why I was really interested in doing something like this is as you get older, you know, I guess where your passions lie tend to change a little bit. And one thing that I've loved over the last 3 years is, I guess, a few times that I've worn a mic when I've like captained a team on telly. And then I get some feedback from fans or whoever watching saying, you know, oh, that was really interesting. I learned something new there. That was really cool to find out. And I guess just being able to add insight or a different perspective or a player's perspective on, you know, to, I guess, create a little bit more to speak about or, you know, just educate the fan in any way, and for me to also be educated by other opinions like yourself, which is why I think we're going to be a pretty good combo.
Let's talk some cricket. White ball series against Pakistan, T20 and one-day series wrapped up last night. Comprehensive victory for Australia. India have also just played in South Africa, and as I mentioned before, we're obviously in the week of the first test of the Australian summer. How excited are you about it?
I think the fact that it's against India obviously the last time India came out to Australia, interesting. I was actually carrying Gatorades for the Australian team the last time India were out here. So, I was in the squad, but I didn't play a game. I was just carrying the drinks, and it was just such a big series to be a part of as a player. The crowds were amazing. The standard of cricket, I remember just from watching, on the sideline, was intense. And the boys battling it out on the field was just, and to see India bring the fight that they did, they held out for a draw at the SCG, and then they went up to the Gabba, typically Australia's fortress, and then won at the Gabba against Australia, which I can't remember the last time a team's ever done that. And I know Australia are going to be that hungry to try and, I guess, make sure that doesn't happen again this time around. I think the Australian team hasn't changed a whole lot since then. A lot of the players have just got a lot more experienced, and I think they'll be ready to go for this summer.
10 years since we beat India in Australia. That's a long time. I mean, I can't remember the last time any Australian team, other than maybe the Wallabies, went a 10-year decade period without beating a certain nation. So it's a big challenge.
Yeah, well, they've only been here twice in that time, Tom, so we can all...
but that doesn't sound quite as dramatic.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can all manipulate statistics to make it sound bigger than it actually is, and you're doing pretty well there, mate. But I don't think it's dire straits for the Australian team by any stretch of the imagination, and, I just think they're going to be very, very tough to beat here at home this time around.
Mo keeps trying to throw me on my podcast hosting, and I'll have you know that the great Wazza... king of the fanatics. He told me that he wanted to do a cricket podcast, and he'd approached the full panel of Marks. Mark Waugh, Mark Taylor, Mark Nicholas. None of them could do his podcast due to prior commitments. And he said fourth on his list was Tom Gallop. So while Mo might have his doubts, the king, the man in charge, has full faith in me. So just back off.
No worries. How did we go from 3 Marks to then a Tom?
Everyone knows a Tom follows a Mark.
Okay.
Right, now, the one-day series. Was interesting. I'm a big cricket fan. I know you're a big cricket fan. Were you caught off guard by the fact that the first international of the summer started on a Monday night?
Look, it wasn't even something I thought about until you just asked me now. So I've been caught off guard by that question. I didn't even realise it started on a Monday night. I'm going to guess that there's not much else on a Monday night, so maybe, the ratings would dominate and they'd have people watching telly, advertising. I can't imagine it'd be the best night in terms of people going out to the ground to watch, but it wouldn't have much competition on TV.
I think there was nearly 30,000 there at the MCG on the first night, which I thought was pretty surprising.
Actually?
Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the batting. Neither team made 200 in the one-day series. And last night, we got the first 50 of the Australian summer by Australian players. Stoinis made a glistening 60 to get Australia over the line very comfortably. Do you read something into that, or am I missing something?
Oh, look, I think... For a start, there was a score over 200 in the first game of the ODI series.
Check me on that.
Hugo, please. Both teams got... Pakistan got 202 or 203 and Australia chased it 8 down. So, but then in the second and third game, it looked like Pakistan were on their way to score well over 200, but they just didn't have a total to chase. So, but I definitely take your point in terms of the 6 games. I would say being, especially in the T20 series, definitely in favour of the bowlers. And whilst the batters, don't come out looking like superstars, which is so often the case in 2020 cricket, we want to see the balls flying into the crowds. We want to see 4s and 6s. Instead, we saw, Adam Zampa with an economy rate of 6 and taking a bunch of wickets.
And an incredible salad.
And what a haircut. And it was about time. I just thought Adam had been... In terms of, sunglass colour, hair colour, length, style, he'd just been a little quiet for a while, and it was great to see him bring out the Slim Shady.
I reckon everyone around you would feel a bit more certain about whether you were joking or being serious if you had that haircut. Obviously, captaining the Sixers again this year. What do you reckon? Chance?
I'm not sure my hair can even go that colour. It would have to take a lot of bleach.
How quickly did you decide, just quickly on aesthetics? Personally, one of the things that I was most nervous about today was what to wear. I think my hair looks pretty good, but my outfit I'm uncertain about. Firstly, you look really good. I'm jealous of the suede boots. How did I go?
Yeah, look, the sneakers and the white socks and the jeans, only a man like you can pull that off, Tom. So, I'm not here to cast judgment. I'm not sure about your hair either, but if you're happy, I don't want to take you away from that. So let's just leave it at that. You're looking good.
I'm going to say I came
You're
out
doing
on top
really
there.
well at the moment.
I came out on top there. Back to the batting just quickly. One thing that I noticed was that Australia started hot quite a few times. Fraser McGurk in particular, he goes very hard. An old school cricket fan like myself, obviously you get to 15, 20, you try and then consolidate, go and make a big score. But are these quick fire 20s in the first 2 or 3 overs kind of the new norm for an opening batter? What do you think?
Look, I don't think it's necessarily the new norm, but it's definitely, part of Jake's, I guess, attractiveness to a lot of teams and how he's able to get that early boundary away or multiple early boundaries away at the start of a game. It's not necessarily what every team is about or after, but obviously with the way Australia is setting up their white ball cricket and the go that he's getting not only in T20 cricket but in one-day cricket, that's what this team is asking and wanting, and Jake's going to do his absolute best to deliver that.
Last summer, when he made that 200 against Tasmania, I was on the 5th hole at Bonnie Doon, and being an avid cricket fan, I got a notification that Fraser McGurk had made 50. I then 4-putted on 6, and as I walked off the green, I got a notification that he'd made 100. So in the time that I'd played 7 or 8 golf shots, he'd gone from 50 to 100. That's unheard of.
It is, and what is heard of a lot more commonly is that you 4-putted. So that's a very common occurrence where Jake's 100 that summer was a very rare occurrence of, what was it again, 27 balls or something like that? Yeah. That was nuts. But I think, whilst we haven't quite seen that at the next level yet, to be fair, and to his defence, it would be very hard to produce that at international level on big stadiums. I remember that game, and whilst it was, amazing batting to do it, but to have one of the boundaries there on that particular day was quite short, and that just won't be replicated in international cricket. It's not to say he won't, score 100 off a very small amount of balls in international cricket, but it's just a matter of, I guess, managing expectations. And yeah, he is a really dynamic batsman, and that's why he's been given these opportunities. I think obviously the job isn't to just get 20 and get out. But the fact that he is, the thing that I'm loving and enjoying about him at the top is that he's consistently at least getting a start, and if he doesn't, he's not wasting balls at the top as well. So whether he scores runs or he doesn't, he's not leaving the team in a really bad place. If he gets out, he's not like he's getting 3 off 12 or 3 off 15 or something like that.
Now, it happened last night. Obviously, the middle order came to the party. And you and I have talked about this a little bit before in white ball cricket. But what is going on with the Australian middle order not being able to come in off a fast start, consolidate, and then build a score of 250, 300? As a very successful middle order batsman yourself, what do you think the boys are kind of missing there to not kind of take that hot start and actually build an innings through the full 50 or 20 over allotment?
Yeah, I guess, again, it probably comes down to, I think we mentioned a few times already, but when you have maybe both openers getting off to a blinder and then, they might both get out at the same time, I think sometimes then 3 and 4 come in, and instead of just, the wickets being spaced out over time, there's a really quick succession of wickets, and Australia have often been out there with 2 new batters, which just makes it a little bit more difficult to start your innings when one of the batters isn't set. And And, there's not that easy boundary coming at the other end, which I think in the past is what Australia's done so well. And I think one thing we're also forgetting is we've been pretty lucky in the sense of having David Warner and Aaron Finch open the batting in one-day cricket for such a long time. And they're just a really stable and experienced pair. These two in Short and McGurk, they're still finding their way in international cricket. And I love that they've just been given the license to go out there and bat and just chase it, and that's what they're going to do. And I'm sure soon, Matt Short, his consistency in just in any cricket around the world at the moment is, as a T20 batter, I'm not sure there's a better opening batter, in terms of just churning out runs in the last 24 months. It's been phenomenal. What he's been doing in the Big Bash is ridiculous in the last sort of 2 to 3 years. So I'm glad that he's getting a good run at that level, and I think he's going to do really well over time. I think we just got to make sure that we're not too harsh on these two guys. They play a really exciting brand of cricket, and at times it might look a little silly, but they're going to put some bums on seats as well.
Now, you mentioned Dave Warner and Aaron Finch there, two guys who, like yourself, played all three formats for Australia. We touched on it briefly before, but last night's team, we won't see any of those guys in Friday's test team. Is that the new norm? Because as a fan, I still find it a little bit weird that Australia play games 4 days apart, but there's going to be 22 different players that take the field in those two games. How do the players feel about that dynamic?
Yeah, look, I'm not exactly sure. It's not always... It kind of depends how or why that's happened. So I think in this case, guys might have been pulled out of that third T20 to give themselves a bit more rest or time for the test coming up. And I think then in that case where it's not sort of, natural or an organic selection point of view, I have no problem if there are 22 different players playing in the two different games, as long as, for me, I guess, as long as they're the best 11 in each game, for each format and for that situation. But I guess in terms of scheduling, maybe we could be doing a little bit better to make sure that we do have the best 11 out there playing each time. There's some things we couldn't avoid there, like Trav obviously becoming, again, a father who obviously would have been playing in the T20 and one-day series if it wasn't. He's had a big year, and he's going to have another big year coming up. Another one of those guys who plays all three formats. But I think we're going to probably see that less and less, especially from the batting point of view, where we've been really lucky over the last 10 years of having, two of the best in Steve Smith and David Warner being a real constant across all three formats. And I'm just not sure how often we're going to see that moving forward in the next 10 or 15 years, because I think what's asked in Sheffield Shield cricket or Test cricket is completely different of a batter to what's asked in T20 cricket, both domestically and international.
If last night someone had gotten injured, done a hammy before the game, say Maxi does his hammy in the warm-up, and you get the call, you're flying to Hobart, which cricketer would be most suited to replace you on the big brown couch? Who's got the bant like you do?
On the big brown couch.
Why are you on the big couch and I get the little one with flowers?
Do I have to answer that? I think that's pretty clear.
Please answer
it. It's obviously because I'm much bigger.
Mo's
Crick
Crick Info profile describes him as a hulking all-rounder.
Yeah. I'm not sure too many batters that face me these days are too worried about my Hulk status as a bowler. But, yeah, I guess that's what happens when you're in your 20th year as a professional cricketer. Sometimes you're just not moving quite as quickly as you used to.
Before we get on to the test match, I was just going to quickly ask you, I'm very impressed with the name, Chin Music. How'd you come up with it?
Well, I came up with it, did I? I thought you came up with it.
Word was you came up with it. I know you're a bit of a creative at heart, so it didn't surprise me.
Oh yeah, I guess. No, I definitely didn't come up with it, but I think it works well because chin music is sort of something we talk about when a new batter comes out to the crease, and say Sarfraz Khan in this Test series for India comes out batting number 5, and Big Paddy and Starkey are all rolled up, and they're India 3 for 50. And Sarfraz, he's not the biggest guy you'll ever see, and obviously used to batting a lot on subcontinental wickets. Hasn't played much here in Australia, if at all. I'd say he's going to be in the line of getting a bit of chin music and some uncomfortable questions up around above shoulder height with the ball. So that's what I think we both might be expecting at times, is some uncomfortable questions from each other, Tom. And how do you think you're going to cope with that?
I think I'll be just fine. If you'd asked me how I came up with the name, which I was expecting you to stump me with, I was going to say that it harked back to your run-in with Rory Burns in the UK. Because from what I read of the incident, it sounded like they reconstructed your jaw to make it more proportionate to your schnoz.
Oh, yeah. And to do that, they had to borrow a bit of your chin. Roger Ramjet. So
the crimson chin.
Apparently they've gone all the way back. They've flown back to Sydney. They've picked up some bone from Tom Gallop's chin, and they've brought it back. And would you believe it? I've never broken my jaw again.
Mo's an outstanding sort. It's tough to go to the Clovelly Hotel with him because all the eyes are on him. None of them are on me, but that's okay. Absolute pleasure to be sitting next to you, Mo. Before we go to the test, I just want to quickly talk about the last Shield round. Obviously, you were out injured, which was unfortunate, but you must have been happy to see the Blues get back in the winner's circle.
Oh, that was terrific. And to see, I think, such a dominant performance, with a bit of a slow start in the Shield for us with 2 draws and a loss. But the first game of the season, we played really well as a team and just couldn't quite get the win on the last day. And, they were able to fight it out for a draw. But to see such a dominant performance over there straight from, day one, especially having lost the toss as well, and then being able to dominate a game like that, I think a game like that can really turn the momentum in a season. And I think you look at the table now, there's 10 points between all 6 teams, which isn't much. And you can, if you have a good Shield round, you can score 9, 10, 11 points depending on bonus points. So it's still a very tight competition. But I reckon with that match, that sort of confidence, the turnaround, I think Saba's back fit for next game, or Saba's back from Aussie duties for next game here at the SCG, and I think that team is just completely different with Sean Abbott in it as well. It just gives so much balance.
You mentioned the table. How many seasons have you been the New South Wales captain for, first class cricket?
Oh, it's been sort of off and on for a while, but yeah, I
call
don't
it a
know.
decade and a half.
Yeah.
Give or take. Be truthful with me here. Do you understand the point scoring in the Sheffield Shield? Because looking at it here, it's Victoria 20.1, WA 20, South Australia not 19, 19.24, New South Wales 14.33, etc., etc. Could you tell me how you score 5.28 points?
Yeah, I can, but I guess that's kind of, that's my mathematics as a cricket captain. I obviously need to know that. And I think a lot of the time as well, for those who don't know, it's in the first innings of a Shield game. I actually, you know what? I don't know exactly the points for bowling.
I was excited for you to gear up and explain it to me.
Yeah, but for batting, I know for every run over 200, in the first 100 overs, you get 0.1. So if you score 324 in the first 100 overs you get delivered to you, you get 1.24 because that's 124 runs over 200. However, any runs you score after 100 overs is, null and void in terms of the bonus points. So that's to try and encourage like a positive, I guess a positive frame of mind from your batters to try and push the game forward. When there's an opportunity to do so, which over the last 3 or 4 years in Shield cricket hasn't really been needed because there's been a lot of 3-day games because the wickets have been so friendly for bowling. But, and then I guess in terms of points for bowlers, I know that it's about a point a wicket. 0.1 of a point a wicket. So I don't know if that's exact. I think they might have changed a rule a year or two ago to prevent teams declaring 9 down just to stop the other team from getting a full point. Yeah. So
bit of chin music coming at you. I'm just going to put you on the spot. Could Jordan Silk, mutual friend of ours, have answered that question?
I 100% think he would have answered it in his sleep, possibly.
Follow-up question. Are there any of the 6 Shield captains who could not have answered that question?
I'd be surprised if Swepo knew even the batting rules, let alone the bowling.
So it is a tight table. Victoria first, Queensland winless, Tasmania winless, win for New South Wales, 2 wins each for WA and South Australia. WA haven't been second for a while. I feel like they've pretty much been first for 3 or 4 years. What do you reckon? Are they on the way down?
I guess after their last 3 or 4 years, there's only one way they can go. And we're probably seeing that in the one-day comp. There's some performances there, I guess, from them that are very un-WA-like. But I think just the fact that I'm able to make that comparison and even say it's very un-WA-like, I guess speaks to the sort of the culture or the dynasty that they've created over there.
I read an article the other day that said the dynasty is over. It's like the Patriots.
Yeah, look, I think it's too early in the season to say that. And I think they're also, they're finding it a little bit difficult now because of how strong their performances have been. More and more of their players are getting picked to play for Australia. So they're probably finding this year anyway that they're having to live a little bit more, maybe like New South Wales have in the past with, obviously missing a lot more players for domestic cricket. So, you see Aaron Hardy's like a very good cricketer in all 3 formats for WA, hasn't really had the chance to represent WA at all this year. And, the role that he would have in that team would be very similar to someone like a Sean Abbott in the New South Wales team. And I guess we've been really lucky at New South Wales to have someone like Jack Edwards sort of come in and fill the void, but having 2 of those in a team is even better. And I think WA, Cam Green, Mitch Marsh and Aaron Hardy and Stoinis, having 4 players of that sort of caliber in your middle order who can also bowl, they're not having any of them at all. It's not that easy to replace. So, yeah, they're still doing. I mean, to be up there in the Shield is remarkable. I think they've. It's just because what we're comparing them to over the last 3 years. I don't think it's sustainable to have that sort of success for 10, 15 years because obviously other states will catch up. And as I mentioned earlier, people will start getting selected. They'll have to play more games without their key players.
Now, what I'm going to do now, as a very experienced podcast host, is round out our Shield discussion and beautifully segue it into the Test discussion. So the 2 final things that I was going to touch on is where the Shield meets the Test. We love the drama of sport, and of course, after McSweeney was selected to open out of being a middle-order batsman last week, Matt Renshaw comes and gets 100, makes some comments about the opening batsman being hurt about the lack of an opening batter being selected to open the batting for Australia. Tim Payne then makes a comment about how no one made runs earlier in the season. I'm not going to put you in a tough spot here, but I guess how do you feel about McSweeney opening the batting, and do you think the other openers in Shield cricket were a bit unlucky to miss out?
Oh, look, to answer the first half of that question, I'm very comfortable with McSweeney opening the batting for Australia. And it probably comes with a slight recency bias from my perspective because as an opposition captain, I haven't been able to get him out for 2 years in Shield cricket. So, for a start, when the boys went over to Adelaide just recently for that Shield game, I was devastated that I had to miss that game simply because McSweeney wasn't batting in their lineup. And I was like, I don't even have to worry about trying to get him out. I think he's faced something like, in the last 2 Shield games against us, he's faced something like 1,200 balls. And we've just in the first innings of the last Shield game, we got him out, run out. And then I thought maybe that's our plan for the second innings is we've got to try and get him out, run out again. And when you're resorting to run out, you're in dire straits.
Bowling for run outs.
Exactly. So, yeah, I just think, I think it's a great opportunity. I think he's a great kid. Having played against him He's got a terrific attitude to the game. He fields well. He bowls if you need him to bowl. He's been leading that team. A good head on his shoulders. I'm really excited to see what he can offer, and I hope he gets as comfortable as possible at that level, because I think he could be, if we see the best of him, I think he'd be a really big value add to the Australian cricket team.
Good head on his shoulders with you sitting there on the big brown couch with the matching shirt. It must also be a bit of game recognised game, because he's a good-looking rooster as well.
He is. He's a bit shorter than me though, Tom, but...
He's not hulking.
No, I guess he's the full package then, isn't he? He's going to be marketable, especially if you put a couple of yellow pages underneath him there, but I think he is the full package in terms of what we've seen from him at domestic cricket. He's had success in all three formats. He's an intelligent cricketer, technically sound. Now we're just going to hopefully we see that at the next level as well.
So you've sold me on McSweeney. Talk to me about Renshaw, Bancroft, Harris, even Constance at the end, who I know you're pretty close to. Do these guys have the right to feel stiff, or was it not their time?
Look, as I've just come out in full support for McSweeney, I can 100% empathise with the opening batters around the country, because at the end of the day, in Shield cricket and Test cricket, opening the batting is got to be the toughest place to bat. And for people who probably don't realise, especially in Shield cricket, just because, a lot of the time the wickets are just, because it is only 4-day cricket, there's a little bit more in the wicket to make sure that there's going to be a result in 4 days. They don't have to try and get 5 days of cricket out. So there's usually a little bit more moisture in the wicket. There's a little bit more grass on the wicket, and it's just a little bit more bowler friendly than typically a Test wicket might be. So, therefore, it sort of just makes opening the batting in Shield cricket extremely tough. And, I felt if bangers, Cam Bancroft this year, probably just needed one score in his first few Shield games or in the A games, because his numbers over the last 2 years in Shield cricket as an opening batter has just been...
And Maddo too, right?
And Nick Maddinson. And I think Nick would have been, again, he probably just needed 1 or 2 scores as well this year. And he actually fits into that team with his attacking style of batting. And, again, another really good cricket brain with some great sort of ideas around the group as to how to try and get people out, and a leader on the field. But those two guys, in terms of opening the batting in Shield cricket over the last 2 or 3 years, are probably unparalleled in terms of statistically. Sam Whiteman had a good year last year as well, and the guys you've mentioned there, we all know that Matt Renshaw can open the batting really well, and unluckily for him, that score was probably just a game too late. I don't know if it would have made a big difference anyway, but you can definitely empathise with those guys, and Marcus Harris as well. And we've just seen Weatherald come out in the last Shield game, who's, again, when he's at his best, he's a really exciting batter to watch, and technically very sound. But I think, I like the McSweeney decision. He scored a lot of runs. And I think I heard Tubby talking about it the other day. A lot of the time, if you're batting 3 in Shield cricket, sometimes you come in and you're basically opening the batting anyway. But he scored a lot of runs. He scored a lot of runs this year already. He scored a lot of runs last year. And they might just be looking for someone to just settle that order down and let, Marnus and Steve do their thing in the middle order, and Travis do their thing in the middle order as well. They've got a lot of run scorers to come in after. And they've probably identified that early damage could be, getting Marnus and Steve in early could be sort of one way that India could bring Australia undone. And they've tried to get someone in there maybe that can not soak up balls, but, he's a hard man to get out.
Playing cricket as a professional, the one thing that I can't get my head around is the way that you guys deal with selections. I played grade cricket for 15 years, and it would absolutely wreck my week, if not my month, when I was dirty about a selection. I'm absolutely in awe of the fact that you blokes have to do it as a job. I think talking about those guys just then, and I mentioned Sam Constance, reminded me of 4 years ago I was working as a lawyer, and I made a pretty good 60, probably of about 110 balls in second grade. I was captain of the team at the time. And on the Wednesday, doing selections, you're obviously feeling pretty comfortable. I was at my desk. I couldn't make the selection meeting, and the chairman of selectors called me to let me know that a young 15-year-old named Sam Consis, who'd got 100 in third grade the week before, was going back to school cricket 2 weeks later, and someone in second grade needed to make room for him so they could give him a go in second grade. And unfortunately, due to the makeup of the side, it'd be the skipper who would be making way for him. So T. Gallop, captain of second grade, turns out in third grade the week after so that Sam Consis could play. Consis made 4 or 5, ran himself out, and I think I nicked the first ball in third grade. And that fair income wrecked my month. I don't know how you guys deal with it. Can you talk to me about your worst ever or your most dirty ever selection?
Before we go into that, I want to know what it was like for the other 10 guys playing third grade in your team that week. When the lawyer turns up after being dropped from second grade, probably scoring his first 60 in 2 years, mind you, and you turn up into that change room. Tell me what it was like for the other 10 guys in that change room when, son of David turns up angry because he's finally found his form. He's got 60, and then he's been dropped to third grade as the captain. He wasn't even able to negotiate with the club selector or whoever it was. You weren't even able to negotiate with him that, it's someone else that has to go. What was it like for those other 10 people in that change room?
When you've painted the picture so beautifully, it's hard to pull myself out of this hole. But yeah, it was pretty unpleasant for them, I imagine. I think like the dynamic of grade cricket, I'm sure it actually is pretty similar to what happens in the professional game. But trying to put on a brave face after you feel like you've been so royally slighted by someone who you thought was your friend is the most horrific feeling. And yeah, it would have been pretty bad. To circle back, it would have been pretty bad for those blokes in that change room, definitely.
Thanks for your honesty, Tom. I guess for me, in terms of selection, there was one. It was kind of during the COVID sort of time where I'd come off a couple of back-to-back seasons of doing quite well in Shield cricket, batting wise, and I'd been on a couple of tours, and it was actually the last Indian tour to Australia, where I was very close to playing probably the next batter in.
You were seen as a little bit of a subcontinental specialist there in the red ball game at one point, were you?
Unfortunately, yes. But I guess there was probably a little bit of there was a time after that last Indian series, the Test series that we lost here, and they were going to make some changes because we lost the series. We're going to South Africa for a Test series. I'd been selected in that series to go. I'd been told ahead that I was probably going to start and batting at 5, and unfortunately the series didn't go ahead because of COVID, so I didn't get the opportunity to go. And then there was no cricket on here. I think there was IPL, and there was the year that the IPL got split into 2, and we got locked out of the country. And so whoever had been at the IPL, or I think it might have even been whoever's team made the finals or something, they didn't get back in time for the start of the Shield competition because we'd been locked out. And like I was kind of the incumbent, well, not really because I didn't play, but I was supposed to have played, and there hadn't been another Test match since that South African series, and I was coming off 2 really strong years. And then in the first 2 Shield rounds, Trav Head's gone out and scored big runs. Uzi Khawaja's gone out and scored big runs, and they've both
2 mediocre players.
Exactly, and they've both gone on and they got picked in the home Ashes, and I didn't get a look in the squad. And even then, I was a little bit like I could easily be pretty dark about this because I haven't even had the opportunity to play a Shield game, having been locked out of the country because I'd been selected to do something, to play, a different form of international cricket. But I was like, you know what, like, if I'm good enough, I'm just going to score enough runs to be able to force my way back into the team another time. And I think at the end, like, I kind of knew it anyway. Like Travis said, what a player he is, and Uzi's coming back in and done what he's done. And at the end of that day, it was the right decision. and a good decision, but still one that could have easily gone my way at that time. And thankfully for Australian cricket, it didn't.
What I'm now acutely aware of is that in your telling of that story, you've solidified your position as an excellent bloke in the way that you handled not making the Australian Test side, and absolutely proved me to be a dickhead for the way that I managed my dropping from second grade to third grade for a bloke who then went on to be the shining star of New South Wales cricket and hopefully one day Australian cricket. So thanks for that, Mo. Final thing on Shield cricket, and we are going to talk a bit more about your career a little bit later, but on the bowling side of things, there's been a lot of press about the Test bowlers, Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, three of the all-time great Australian fast bowlers, but they are kind of getting into their mid-30s. What do you think about the fact... Late 30s for you, my man. I'm still early 30s, don't worry. What do you think about the fact that on current form, it seems like Jackson Bird, who is even older than those three, is the form fast bowler in Shield cricket?
Oh, look, I think that summary might be a little unwarranted. And maybe a little...
Can you stop trying to make me look a bad bloke? I'm trying really hard.
I'm not saying you're a bad bloke. I just think you're overlooking maybe some other performances in Shield cricket by some younger bowlers, not just this year, but over... Like, the first thing that comes to my mind is, say, Joel Paris from WA. I think his last 75 wickets in Shield cricket have come at 15. Like, ridiculous numbers. Fergus O'Neill from Victoria is probably, younger. I don't know exactly how old he is, but I'd say he's under 25, under 24. He's taken 80 wickets at like 19 in Shield cricket. So and I think a lot of first-class bowlers around the country. Nathan McAndrew is another guy who's had some really strong seasons back-to-back, averaging probably less than 20 in his last 70 wickets taken as well. There'd be a lot of bowlers around the country at the moment that, I think their statistics would look pretty good. And I think obviously you've got a bit of recency bias in the fact that Jackson's just come back and taken 11 wickets. But, there's a guy again who, if it wasn't for those three guys mentioned, he probably would have played a lot more Test cricket than he has as well. Like the numbers that he's been able to produce over time in Shield cricket is just almost unmatched, other than maybe his opening bowling partner in Chris Tremaine, who, again, last year, 50 wickets at 15. So I think there's plenty of bowling around the country. We haven't even mentioned like Scott Boland, Nisa, Sean Abbott, and these Jai Richardson, who probably hasn't played as much as we would have liked to see him, but him in full swing. There's no shortage of fast bowlers around this country, and I think it might be, a little bit of the environment. In the last 3 years, the bowling statistics are great, and the batting statistics don't look maybe as good as the bowling do. But I think that's why a lot of, where are our batters coming from? Where are opening batters? But then when it comes to bowling, it's like they're everywhere. Everyone's numbers look great. And I think it's a little bit because of that balance of, ball versus bat in Shield cricket, which I don't mind as well. We're allowed to have games that finish early, and we're allowed to have games where bowlers dominate. And I think it's good for the batters to be able to learn how to try and at least forge runs out in slightly different conditions.
Obviously, you're one of the most respected voices in Australian cricket, so I'm going to do...
That's arguable.
I'm going to do the Australian selectors a little favour. We're going to play a quick game. You're only allowed to answer with one name. Don't say anything else. Of the fast bowlers in Australia, and it cannot be someone in the Test squad for Friday, so Boland's out. If you had to face 5 overs from one bowler, and if you get through that 30 balls, you get $1 million. Who's the bloke you don't want to face?
Oh, it's probably...
One name.
Full fitness, Jai Richardson.
You cheated.
Full fitness isn't someone's name.
So it's Jai Richardson.
It's Jai Richardson.
Take note. Okay. The first test this Friday. Summer kicking off in Perth. I can't remember the last time the summer kicked off in Perth. Hugo, if you could look that one up for me, that'd be awesome. But cricket in Perth, the things that I think of, Adam Gilchrist's 100 is obviously front of my mind. Dave Warner made 100 in a session, which sticks with me big time. Things are a little bit different these days because we're used to those famous games being at the Wacker, and we're now going to Optus Stadium. What's Optus Stadium like? Like, talk to me about Optus versus the Wacker. We kind of lost that iconic ground, but what is cricket like at Optus Stadium like?
It isn't too dissimilar in terms of the cricketing conditions. It's not too dissimilar to the Wacker. The stadium, though, is a completely different experience and atmosphere to the Wacker. It is like just around you, as most arenas are, obviously. But the Wacker didn't quite have that sort of colossal effect that Optus does. It's a really impressive stadium to play cricket in, and that's at domestic cricket level. That's at a Big Bash level. So you can probably imagine what it's going to be like walking out just after the toss, day one of a test summer, probably the most important test series in world cricket, really. Australia v India, the two heavyweights. So I think, that energy and that vibe in that stadium for that game is just going to be pretty epic. I've always thought that, and this is, I could be completely wrong on my theory on this, but I've been trying to understand WA's success, over the last 5 years, how they've forged out so many strong cricketers with such a small population. And I do think the conditions that they have over there for cricket, even their club grounds, they're sort of faster, bouncier wickets everywhere over in Perth. And I don't know if it's the soil or what it is, but it produces this, I guess, brand of cricket where you can't hide. So as a batter, if you're facing a bowler and he's on a wicket that's bouncing and true and it's doing a little bit, if you're out of form, you can't hide, But if you're in form, because of the pace, because of the trueness, because of the, value for shots that you get, there's runs to be had. And I think it's the same as a bowler over there. If you're bowling well, there's wickets to be taken because of the pace, the bounce, the carry. But if you're not bowling well, you're not putting the ball in the right area, it disappears, and you can get scored off really quickly. And I think to succeed over there in those conditions, you do actually have to be really disciplined with your cricket, where some maybe on the East Coast a little bit more, especially in terms of fast bowler v batter, you might not have to be as sharp as a batter as maybe you would have to be, in Perth, or the challenges might be different in terms of reverse swing or something like that. The bounce is a bit lower, the wickets are a bit slower, so you can sort of get away with a few more mistakes from a technical point of view on the East Coast to maybe what you could on the West Coast. And I think when you grow up playing on those types of wickets the whole way through, it probably leaves a certain foundation that some of the West Coast batters have, and probably why we see guys like Shaun Marsh with such nice techniques that come out of there.
Growing up, my backyard really picked up the nor'east wind in summer, and Dad used to be able to start getting it to swing into me, and he'd get me bowled in LB a lot, and we'd call it the Randwick Doctor. I'm curious to know whether the new Optus Stadium picks up the Fremantle Doctor, because we all grew up so much knowing that the Fremantle Doctor at the Wacker was such a big part of cricket in the afternoon in Perth.
Yeah. I'd imagine it would still play a factor, probably not as much as it does at the Wacker. And to be honest, there's a wind at every ground you go to, and I think it's kind of one of those things that just get passed down from generation to generation, that it kind of always comes from the same end, and you want certain people bowling with it and from it. And as long as you've got, which the Australian team do, guys that can swing it either, one bowler can bowl from one end and one bowler can bowl from the other pretty comfortably, especially when you've got a left armour, that's going to happen pretty organically. So, I don't think it's a huge thing to deal with. However, I don't think the Indian team have, I'm not sure if they've got a shoe-in left-arm bowler to coming down, so that could hurt them. However, they do have, the spinners that could operate, and sometimes the spin is actually harder because of the drift you can generate with a wind, so they could have, the spinners operating from both ends. If spin will play a part at Optus, we don't know yet, but there's definitely those things to take into consideration in terms of the wind, and luckily for Australia, we do have, I guess, a bowling attack that can take advantage of it when it does roll in.
I asked Hugo when the last time the test summer started in Perth was, and he was good enough to hold up 26 November. That's about as helpful as a back pocket on a T-shirt, Hugo. I don't know when that test match was, but thank you for the effort. Quickly, let's talk about the preparation of both teams. There was a fair bit said about the fact that the Indian big dogs didn't come out and play a practice match. They decided to play an intra-squad match instead after the A series had wrapped up. Do you think they'll be ready and raring to go?
Yeah, look, the amount of cricket these guys play, especially the Indian international cricketers, they're just 12 months of the year all the way around. They don't stop. So they'll be ready to go. Hopefully they're fresh enough to go, which is, I'm assuming, why they didn't want to come out any earlier. And I'm sure they will be. And if they're not, I think adrenaline and, the spectacle and the fact that it is, a huge series. And I think for a lot of those, for guys like Virat and Rohit, a life-changing series for them last time they came out here to do what they did. Not many teams have been able to do that. And they're going to come out here with that sort of expectation and feeling like they want to do that again. I'm sure that would have felt very good for them all. So, they're going to want to repeat that. And even if they are feeling a bit flat or tired or whatever, they're just going to be able to get up for that because of, I guess the spectacle, the test summer, and it's such a big series against, it's the two heavyweights of test cricket at the moment.
You mentioned Rohit and Virat. Been a lot of talk about Virat's form in the last kind of 3 to 5 years. He obviously had such a momentous first decade of his test career. And Rohit's been a bit out of sorts for the last series or two. I guess you're going to say to me that they're both going to bounce back like absolute champions.
Am I that predictable already? I guess having looked, Virat's last 5 or 6 test matches, obviously not his strongest. But last year in 2023, I'm pretty sure he still averaged 55. And, the fact that people are out there, saying, he's not at his best, I probably don't understand what it's like to have to average 55 in test cricket. And I know he's done it his whole career. But, that is an epic level of delivering, performance. And whilst, his last 5 games or 6 test matches haven't been quite as strong as that could just well mean for the rest of this calendar year, he's going to catch up and make sure that he does end up averaging 50 for the end of this calendar year. So hopefully that's not the case for Australian fans and the Australian Test cricket team and my mates who are out there trying to make sure they're not on the field for any longer than 90 overs. So, obviously I'm hopeful that Hoff and Camo and Starkey are able to knock them off and then go put their feet up at the end of the day. But I don't think too many people will be complaining if Virat Kohli is scoring runs and, the Indian Test cricket team is putting up a good fight.
I've got an interesting question for you because we've touched on it. You're a bit of a cricket tragic yourself, despite how good you've been at playing the game. But I feel like as I've gotten older in these big test series, when I was 12, I wanted Australia to win 5-0. I actually want Virat to turn up here and get 200 or 300s, and I want Ashwin to be at his best. For someone who's played for Australia and you've played with all these guys and they're your mates, when you're sitting down to watch the test this summer, are you wanting a really good contest or are you wanting Australia to drive them into the ground?
Yeah, look, I definitely still want a really good contest, but it's hard. That's what I want the result to be, is entertaining and good to watch. But I still get nervous watching my mates go out and play. So, every time Pat's bowling, every time Mitch's bowling, Hoff, Smudger, guys that I've played cricket with for a long time, Davey back when he played, when they're actually performing and out there batting, I still get really nervous watching them, wanting them to do well. It's hard to actually, if I had it my way, they'd just take all the wickets or score all the runs and, Australia would win 5-0. But, at the same time, I do want it to be an entertaining product. I do want it to be close. And I think it will be just because of the two teams that we've got coming up and how strong the Indian cricket team is. But, there's definitely a case of I want it to be tight, but I want all my mates to do really well.
Another great bloke answer from Mo. Pulling on that a little bit, if you're playing Test cricket for Australia, is this the series or is it the Ashes? Like, which is the one that you are most wanting to be a part of and most wanting to come out on top and lift either the Border Gavaskar Trophy or the urn at the end of the day?
Oh, probably traditionally, obviously the Ashes, in years gone by, would have been the series. I think people maybe, if we're just going to talk cricket economics for a second now, I think people still maybe don't really understand, what happens to cricket economics when India are doing well or when they're not. And I think to keep the world of cricket ticking over, we need Indian cricket strong, and to make sure the Australian team is still relevant in the world of cricket economics, then I think we need to stay strong and challenge that Indian cricket team. So, I would say that's really changing just because of maybe, as I mentioned there, the economics, and I think a lot of the players understand that how much rides on this series as well. Now it is also a five test series.
How good is that, by the way?
I know,
Thank
it's
God.
fantastic, but typically it hasn't been. So I think now that it is, if it's not on par, it's probably greater than in terms of home. I think away the boys would probably still prefer, Ashes away. However, I think because they've done that now, because they've retained or won an Ashes away, I think that Indian series, it's going to be a really tough one because India are so strong and dominant at home. But I think our boys will be able to take some confidence out of what New Zealand's just done over there recently, which is just epic, by the way. But seeing them do what they've done, I think our boys will take a lot of confidence out of that for their next trip over there. But I think an away five test series in India will be the next kind of thing for this Australian cricket team to really, what they've done over the last few years is amazing, but that's like the final frontier for them, I think.
Last thing on the Indian team, I know that there's a lot of Australian cricket fans who are, very passionate, interested fans who will mostly just tune in for the Australian Test summer. So this kind of 3 or 4 block or month block that's coming up, and may not be so aware of what happens with the away teams when they're not in Australia. Obviously, quite a few big names returning for India this series. Kohli. If you'd asked me who my mum's name was then, I would have completely forgotten. We got Kohli, Ashwin, Jadeja, Rohit. They're all coming back, but it is a new series. It's a few years removed from the last time they were out here. For more casual cricket fans, who are some of the new names that people should be watching out for?
Yeah, I think a guy I'm really excited to watch bat is Jaswal, who's been killing it in,
Is that how you pronounce it? I was doing it in the mirror before. If you'd put it on me, I was saying Jaiswal, but
Jaiswal. I'm going to go with a bit more of a Jaswal, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to find out. We'll ask him once he's out here. Once we get him
once we get him on the big brown couch.
We'll replace him on the Geski. We'll get him up here next to the Geski, and Jaswal can come in for a session. But his numbers already in Test cricket are super impressive, and I'm just going to rattle it off the top of my head. I think he's already scored 3 Test hundreds in about 12 or 14 tests, averaging about 55.
100 on debut.
100 on debut, double 100 as well.
Didn't get 2 50s on debut, though.
No, he didn't, Tom. We'll talk about that later. But in first-class cricket, this is what he's done. He's barely 21. I'm not sure. 21 years of age. I think he's had about 26, 27 innings in first-class cricket outside of Test cricket, and he scored 900s in 26 or 27 innings. That is just ridiculous. Like averaging 72 or 73 at that age in first-class cricket and he scores them quickly. He scores at a clip. So I think
I hadn't realised how good he is in T20 cricket and how well he goes in the IPL.
Yeah, he does. And again, like at that age to have the success he's had already is just phenomenal. And I'm really excited about watching what he can do. And he's going to be up against the best, but I feel like he's just going to do it in his own really aggressive way. And I think that's going to be exciting for the Australian public as well. The other one I'm really excited about watching, if he does get an opportunity here, is the guy I mentioned a little earlier, Sarfraz Khan, who's this like short little, he's not your typical sort of looking Test cricketer of the modern day where, I guess the Test cricketers these days are all looking a little bit more athletic. And especially when you look... Hulking even. And especially when you look at our Australian Test cricket team, I mean, they're all 6'5", 6'6". They're, it's even some of our batters and our all-rounders in Mitch Marsh, Cam Green. All these guys are pure athletes. And then I guess you'll see Sarfraz Khan's when he comes out. He's barely 5'8", 5'7". Not the most athletic-looking player in the world, but again, a guy who averages 65 in first-class cricket over there in India. Has sort of been in and out of the IPL for quite a while now, but has just recently started playing Test cricket for India and had a decent start. But his style of play will be very different to anything I think we've been used to here in Australia watching, typical Test cricket technique. There's a lot of runs behind the wicket, which is where obviously, here in Australia, where we put a lot of our fielders with, 3 slips and a gully typically, he seems to score a lot of his runs through third man, through backward point, behind square on the leg side. So I'm interested to see how he's going to go about his batting here in Australia. There's a bit of flair to it as well. There's a bit of premeditation. And I think he's going to be the type of guy that's going to really sort of throw a spanner in the works of the Australian bowlers, or the opposite way around where, he may not trouble them at all. But I'm just excited to see how that pans out if he gets an opportunity.
Sarfraz Khan and our man Jaiswal / Jaswal. They're the two men. You heard it here from Mo. Quickly, before we wrap up, and we are running out of time, but on the Aussie side, you mentioned they're going to be hungry to break this 10-year drought against India and Australia, despite you wrecking my dramatic headline of that before. We've kind of touched on McSweeney. You certified your good bloke status by really endorsing him. Should the Australian public, the Australian cricket fandom, should they be starting to get nervous about the fact that this is an aging team? And do you think this is the last summer that this team, as we know it, will kind of stay together? Or, have they got a couple of summers left in them yet?
I definitely feel like it will probably be the last home series against India. They typically, as you've pointed out, since there've only been 2 series in the last 10 years, there's probably going to be 3 or 4 years before the next one. But I think naturally you do see a lot of changes in that time. And I think part of the reason why this team is so successful is because they haven't had many changes in the last 3 or 4 years. So they've been able to pump in a lot of experience into a lot of players. But there will be a changing of the guard in time. It may not be for next summer, though. Like, that's only, 12 months away. So, I don't think anyone in that team is is feeling like this is my last summer. So I don't think there's any sort of pressure for the summer here next year. But typically, I think when you look back in especially recent history, I would say that experienced or aging Australian teams are successful ones. And, one that obviously comes to mind is Steve Waugh, Mark Waugh, Glenn McGrath, Gillespie.
Mark Waugh of the Marks that I mentioned
before.
One
of the 3 Marks that you mentioned earlier. But, there was a very experienced Test cricket team, with a lot of tests between them by the end of, as they were getting into their sort of 30s, mid-30s, late 30s even, and they were still dominating Test cricket. And I think that's what experience gives players is, understanding the game, understanding how long they need to be good for in a game. And it's probably why this Australian team has been so successful is they've just been in so many situations before that they can call upon, this is what I did last time, or this is what worked here, where, obviously a young and inexperienced player can't do that. So I don't think it's necessarily something we want to push or encourage, but I guess the good thing is, not losing all your players at once would be, really...
That is what's threatening to happen, right?
Well, I don't think so, because I think he gave Camo a bad rap before saying he was in his mid-30s.
I would never give Camo a bad rap. I love Camo.
He's just 30. And, sure, he's not bowling 155 k's an hour.
I reckon he's 32. I reckon he's about 40 days younger than me.
Okay, well there you go. He probably got you out a lot in junior cricket. I'm assuming that's probably why.
Lucky to play him. Much.
But like, he's a guy that he can do whatever he needs to do with the ball. Whether we need a really fast spell, and
Camo's 31.
There you go.
Hugo just held it up.
We're somewhere in between.
For another episode, I do have a good story about playing Camo. I'm sure he remembers it.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll save that for when Camo's on the brown coach. But yeah, for someone like him who can bowl, he's not someone who relies on pace to be successful. So if he wants to, I just can't see why he can't play Test cricket for another half, 7-8 years. Jimmy Anderson's just played till he's in his early 40s. So I just, I think with some of these guys, it'll kind of be at their own leisure, or not leisure, but it'll be up to them. But
deservedly so, right?
Yeah, the numbers are just ridiculous what they've been putting out.
Speaking of numbers, we're just going to do 2 rapid-fire question segments to finish, and then we will wrap up this inaugural episode. I'm guessing you're going to tell me that every Australian batsman is going to average 50 and all the bowlers are going to take 30 to 40 wickets. But if there was going to be one batsman that's going to average 60 and one bowler to take over 40 wickets, who's it going to be?
The batting one for me, and this is just going off, and I know people are going to say, oh yeah, it's because you're mates with him, but it's not. I'm going to go Steve Smith. Easy choice, sure. One of the
Big fan
greats.
of the show as well.
Big fan of the show. I know he's going to be listening. Hi, Steve. Anyway, the way he was moving in that one-day series against Pakistan, he got 44, I think, in the first game and 35 in the second, and you're going to go, oh, mate, that's average. But I'm not going off the scores. I'm going off the way he was moving, his footwork, where he was scoring runs, and he just looked sharp. He just looked like he was on... I'll
tell you another indicator. I got word from Perth on Saturday that he played terrible golf.
Yeah.
And I reckon that's got to be an indicator of the fact that he's been batting a lot.
It does. It means he's starting to prioritise his cricket again. And unfortunately for him, that's probably where his bread is buttered, is cricket. Definitely not on the golf course, because just like you, the 4-putt is a very common occurrence for him in a round of golf. So I think we're going to see him back at his best this Test summer. Having seen what he put out in just those, there were probably only 40 balls in each game. And again, not huge scores, but his bat path, his footwork, it was just crisp. And I'm thinking that he's going to be on for this Test summer with the ball.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say.
Okay,
just keep
sorry.
on track.
With the ball, I'm going to go Captain Courageous there in Paddy.
So 2 really controversial.
Well, it's one of whoever I pick with the ball in that Australian team, you're going to go, oh yeah, mate, they've done it all before.
You might have told me that Mitch Marsh was gearing up for a big series with the ball.
No, I think he's going to be gearing up for about 5 to 6 overs a day. That's all he's going to be doing, and I'm sure he'll do it well, but I'm not putting Mitch Marsh out there for 40 wickets.
I think there's no Australian fan that doesn't love seeing Pat Cummins in full flight. So if you are right about that, there's not going to be many disappointed people. Mate, I think we're getting pretty close to time. How do you reckon we went?
Well, I thought that was fantastic. I
drank a lot more of my beer than you did.
I've been so pleasantly surprised at how good you've been. Like, to answer your question that you asked me about an hour ago, about out of 7, how confident I was probably about 3. But having sat through the last hour, mate, you've been spectacular. And your chin's actually not that bad from this angle either.
I got Hugo to adjust the camera as well, so it's even smaller on there. No, it's been great fun. Didn't expect to be here a couple of weeks ago, but pretty excited about what we've got to come. Mo and I have been talking about some of the guests that we've got to come, and pretty exciting lineup, I reckon. Big Test summer, big bash summer. Bit going on with the girls as well, and I think over the next couple of months we're going to cover all that. I'm pumped. Are you pumped? I'm
very excited, mate. If this has been anything to go by, yeah, let's keep bringing the chin music.
Chin music, part of the Fanatics fan club, providing you with a fan's eye view of the summer of cricket. I didn't actually appreciate what a fan Mo is So to have the fan's eye of Mo, who's still very involved in the game, we're very lucky. Once again, if you would like more chin music, the Fanatics Clubhouse has got everything you need. You can find the Fanatics on Instagram and Facebook at the Fanatics. On YouTube, it's Fanatics TV. And the Fanatics website, thefanatics.com. It's all there. Big times ahead for chin music. Big summer ahead for Moe. We're pumped for the first test this Friday. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Tom, we didn't get to talk about my test debut.
Well, that's something to be really excited for a future episode.
Oh, God, we ran out of time, did we? Here you go. We run out of time. I want to talk about my test debut.
Cheers, everyone.
Well, there it was, ladies and gentlemen. Yet another episode of Chin Music. If you enjoyed it as much as we did, please hit the like and subscribe button somewhere under here, and we'll see you on the next one.
Oh, yes, Moe!